The war room of the Zephyrian High Command glowed with blue light from dozens of floating screens, showing star maps and battle reports. Commander Vex Thule stood in the center, his tall gray body covered in the silver armor that marked his rank. His large black eyes studied the newest intelligence reports that had arrived from the outer edge of their territory. The reports spoke of a new species that had been discovered in a small solar system far from the main trade routes. The species called themselves humans, and they lived on the third planet from their star. Intelligence Officer Kethra approached the commander with a datapad in her clawed hands. She was smaller than the commander, but her mind was sharp and she rarely made mistakes in her analysis of enemy forces. "Commander, we have completed our study of these humans," she said in the clicking language of her people. "They are weak creatures, with soft pink skin and no natural weapons. Their bodies break easily and they die after only about 80 of their years. Most interesting is that they fight among themselves constantly, yet somehow they work together when needed." Vexthul took the datapad and scrolled through images of human cities and their primitive spacecraft. The humans had only recently learned to split atoms for energy, and their fastest ships could barely reach the edge of their own solar system. Compared to Zephyrian technology that could cross the galaxy in weeks, this was laughably primitive. "How many worlds do they control?" he asked. "Only one, sir. They have never left their home system, though they have sent small probes to nearby planets. They seem to spend most of their time fighting wars with each other over resources and territory." The commander made a sound that was the Zephyrian equivalent of laughter. In the past 1,000 years, his people had conquered 47 star systems. Each victory had been swift and complete. The Zephyrians had evolved on a world where they were the apex predator and their warrior caste. The Drakmor had been genetically enhanced to be even more dangerous. Standing 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and reflexes faster than any organic creature should possess, they had never faced meaningful resistance from any species. "What about their military capabilities?" Vexthul asked as he continued, "Reading primitive at best, sir. They use chemical explosives and kinetic weapons. Their most advanced ships are powered by nuclear fusion, which our ancestors abandoned 3,000 years ago. Based on our analysis, 3 Drakmor warriors would be sufficient to eliminate their leadership and force their surrender." Vexthul nodded slowly. This would be the easiest conquest in Zephyrian history. The humans had resources that the Empire could use, including rare metals, and their planet seemed to have abundant water. More importantly, their location would serve as a useful staging point for future expansion into that region of space. Meanwhile, on the third planet, from Sol Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morrison sat in the newly built Space Defense Command Center outside Colorado Springs. The facility had been constructed in secret over the past 5 years as humanity had detected strange signals from deep space. Jake was a career military officer who had served in 3 wars and had been chosen to head the new Alien Contact Protocols Division, though until recently he had hoped the job would be mostly theoretical. Dr. Lisa Chang rushed into the command center holding a tablet covered with decoded text. Lisa was one of Earth's leading experts in xenobiology and linguistics, and for the past 6 months she had been working day and night to translate intercepted alien communications. Her face was pale with exhaustion and worry. "Jake, you need to see this immediately," she said, setting the tablet on his desk. "We have been intercepting their communications for weeks now, and I have finally broken their basic language structure. They are definitely planning to invade Earth." Jake studied the translations, feeling his stomach drop. The aliens referred to humans as primitives and soft creatures. Worse, they seemed to believe that only 3 of their warriors would be needed to conquer the entire planet. The timeline suggested they would arrive in approximately 3 months. "How accurate are these translations?" he asked. "About 90% certain on the basic meaning," Lisa replied. "Their language has mathematical concepts built into the grammar structure, which makes it easier to decode. But Jake, these creatures think we are insects. They have conquered dozens of worlds and they expect us to surrender as soon as we see their warriors." Jake immediately contacted President Helen Carter, who called an emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council within 6 hours. Representatives from every major nation connected via secure video links as Jake and Lisa presented their findings. "To the most powerful people on Earth, ladies and gentlemen," President Carter addressed the group, "we are facing humanity's first confirmed alien contact, and the intelligence suggests they view us as an easy target. We have approximately 90 days to prepare for what may be an invasion by technologically superior forces. General Pete Harrison, who commanded the Allied Space Command, leaned forward in his chair. What do we know about their capabilities? Lisa opened another file on her tablet. Based on their communications, they possess faster-than-light travel energy weapons and personal armor that our current weapons probably cannot penetrate. Their warriors are called Drakmor, and they appear to be genetically engineered for combat. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth's most advanced weapons seemed primitive compared to what these aliens possessed. Several representatives began discussing evacuation plans and surrender options, but Jake stood up and cleared his throat. With respect to everyone in this room, we cannot assume defeat before the battle begins. Yes, they have better technology, but they are making one crucial mistake. They think we are weak because we fight among ourselves and our technology is primitive. But humans have survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, plagues, and countless wars. We adapt and we survive. It is what we do best. President Carter nodded slowly. Colonel Morrison is right. We have 3 months to prepare, and humanity has always been at its best when facing impossible odds. General Harrison, I want every military expert on the planet working together. Dr. Chang, continue monitoring their communications. We need to know everything about these creatures. As the meeting ended and the world leaders signed off, Jake remained in the conference room staring at the decoded alien messages. Lisa sat beside him, equally thoughtful. Do you really think we have a chance? She asked quietly. Jake looked at her and managed a small smile. Lisa, these aliens have conquered dozens of worlds by being stronger and having better weapons. But they have never faced a species like us. They have never fought humans who have spent millions of years learning to survive against bigger, stronger predators. They are about to discover what happens when the hunted learn to hunt back. The war room of the Zephyrian High Command continued to glow with blue light as Commander Vex Thule made his final preparations. In 3 months, Strike Force Alpha would arrive at the human world, and the 48th conquest of the Zephyrian Empire would begin. What the commander did not know was that in those same 3 months, humanity would accomplish something that no other species in the galaxy had ever managed. They would turn their greatest weakness into their most dangerous weapon. Mordic stood completely motionless in a clearing surrounded by towering pine trees, his massive form casting long shadows in the afternoon sunlight. For the first time in his genetically enhanced existence, the Drakmor warrior felt something his species had not experienced in thousands of years. Fear. Not the healthy respect for a dangerous enemy that warriors were taught, but the primal terror of being hunted by something unseen and unknown. His biosensors showed no life forms within. A mile radius, yet every enhanced instinct screamed that he was surrounded. The sensation was so foreign to his psychology that his armor's medical systems began running diagnostics assuming he was experiencing some kind of system malfunction or alien disease. War leader he transmitted to Zekthar, who was 3 miles away, navigating through thick forest. The humans are not behaving according to our tactical projections. I detect no enemies, but I feel as though I am standing in the center of a trap, 3,000 feet above Mordak Sergeant First Class Tony Williams. Lay flat on his belly on a rocky outcrop completely invisible beneath a camouflage tarp that matched the surrounding stone perfectly. Around him, 50 other snipers maintained similar positions, each connected through quantum encrypted communications that the aliens could not intercept even if they detected the signals. Target Bravo is stationary, Williams reported through his throat microphone. Psychological warfare phase appears to be effective. Alien is displaying signs of stress despite no direct contact. Dr. Chang's research had revealed something crucial about Zephyrian psychology that their own military had never considered a weakness. As apex predators from a world with minimal environmental challenges, they had never developed the hypervigilant survival instincts that had shaped human evolution. The constant sensation of being watched and stalked was deeply disturbing to creatures whose ancestors had never known what it meant to be prey. The humans had learned this through careful analysis of intercepted communications and had designed their entire strategy around psychological pressure rather than direct confrontation. Every movement, every sound, and every moment of silence was carefully orchestrated to create maximum stress in minds that had no framework for processing such sustained fear. 20 miles away, Combat specialist Helvane found himself lost in the labyrinthine cave systems that honeycombed the Rocky Mountains. What he did not know was that human engineers had spent weeks modifying natural cave networks, creating false passages and hidden chambers designed to confuse and disorient anyone unfamiliar with the terrain. Captain Chris Parker coordinated the underground operation from a concealed command post carved into the mountainside. Dozens of screens showed thermal imaging feeds from sensors placed throughout the cave system, tracking the alien warriors' increasingly erratic movements. Alien target. Charlie has been circling the same section for 6 hours, Parker reported to the Central Command. His suit's power consumption has increased by 40% as navigation systems work overtime. Psychological profile suggests extreme frustration building toward panic. The humans had discovered that Drakmor armor, while incredibly protective, required substantial energy to operate its advanced systems. By forcing the aliens into energy-intensive situations, difficult terrain, climate extremes, and constant tactical decision-making, they could gradually drain their opponent's resources while remaining completely safe themselves. War leader Zekthar pushed through undergrowth that seemed designed to snag his armor and slow his progress. Every step required him to make decisions about route selection, and his suit's environmental systems worked constantly to maintain optimal temperature and atmosphere inside his armor. What should have been a simple march to the nearest human settlement had become an exhausting obstacle course. He paused to check his power levels and was disturbed to see they had dropped to 85% in just 6 hours of walking. On previous campaigns, his armor could operate for weeks without recharging, but the constant demands of navigating unfamiliar terrain while maintaining full defensive postures was draining energy at an unprecedented rate. Maintain formation, he transmitted. To his team, though, he was beginning to doubt the wisdom of that order. These creatures cannot possibly sustain coordinated resistance for much longer. Their technology is too primitive to support complex operations. His transmission was cut short as the ground beneath him collapsed. The pit trap was 15 feet deep, lined with sharpened steel spikes coated in a mixture of industrial acids that immediately began eating away at his armor's outer layers. While the spikes could not penetrate Drakmor defenses, the chemical attack forced his suit's protective systems into emergency mode, consuming power at an alarming rate from concealed positions. Around the pit, Corporal Maria Santos and her engineering team watched their carefully constructed trap perform exactly as designed. The pit had taken 3 days to dig and another 2 days to prepare with chemicals and spikes, but seeing the alien warrior struggle inside it made every hour of work worthwhile. Chemical attack is working, Santos reported to the coordination center. Target Alpha's armor integrity decreasing and power consumption spiking. Estimate 40 minutes before suit systems begin failing. Lieutenant Colonel Bobby Chen coordinated all 3 operations from the Central Command buried deep inside Cheyenne Mountain. Banks of screens showed the status of each alien warrior and the hundreds of human personnel involved in the operation. What he saw filled him with grim satisfaction. The aliens expected a conventional war, Chen announced to his staff. Instead, they are getting the full human experience. Asymmetric warfare, environmental exploitation, and psychological pressure designed to break them down piece by piece. Let us see how their superior genetics handle creativity. What the Drakmor warriors were learning too late was that humans had not just adapted to survive in hostile environments. They had evolved to make their environments hostile to anything that threatened them. For millions of years, they had been the persistence hunters who could track prey across continents and who could turn any terrain into a weapon in the cave system. Helvane's movements became increasingly erratic as claustrophobia overwhelmed his genetically enhanced composure. The passages seemed to shift and change, creating an impossible maze where every corridor led to dead ends or deeper confusion. His armor's navigation systems, designed for open battlefields and space combat, proved useless in the deliberately modified underground network. Above-ground specialist Katie Morgan monitored his biometric readings through sensors hidden in the cave walls. Target Charlie is experiencing rapid stress responses, she reported. Heart rate elevated, oxygen consumption increasing, and suit atmospheric systems working overtime. Estimate complete psychological breakdown within 2 hours back in his pit trap. Zekthar finally managed to climb out using his armor's enhanced strength systems, but the effort had cost him precious energy. and his confidence in Zephyrian technological superiority was shattered. If these primitive humans could threaten Drakmor equipment with simple chemicals and mechanical traps, what other surprises awaited them? As he continued through the forest, motion sensors detected movement on all sides, but when he turned to engage the threats, nothing was visible. The humans had learned to exploit his armor's sensor limitations, moving in patterns that created false positives, and sensory overload. Master Sergeant Linda Wright coordinated the harassment campaign from an observation post camouflage to look like a fallen tree. Psychological profile analysis indicates extreme stress in all 3 targets, she reported. Dr. Chang was right about their weakness. Remove their tactical certainty, and they become as vulnerable as any other creature in an environment they do not understand. The breakthrough moment came when Helvain's armor finally overloaded its power systems, trying to process the impossible navigation requirements of the modified cave system. Emergency lighting failed, leaving him in absolute darkness for the first time in his existence. The primal terror that followed was something no amount of genetic engineering could eliminate, and his anguished screams echoed through the caves as he collapsed unconscious. Target Charlie is down, Captain Parker announced. Suit failure, alien is unconscious. Recommend immediate containment and medical stabilization. For War Leader Zekthar, receiving that transmission was the moment he understood the true horror of their situation. The humans had not defeated his warriors through superior strength or advanced technology. They had systematically exploited psychological and environmental factors that Zephyrian military doctrine had never even considered as potential weapons. The Drakmor strike force launched from the massive battleship Dominion's Edge, with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. War leader Zekthar commanded the 3-warrior team, while combat specialists Mordak and Helvain prepared their weapons for what they expected to be a brief and decisive battle. Each warrior stood 8 feet tall and weighed over 400 pounds of muscle bone, and genetically enhanced reflexes wrapped in armor that had deflected plasma cannons and kinetic rounds from dozens of conquered worlds. Their approach to the human solar system followed standard Zephyrian invasion protocols. Zekthar broadcast on all frequencies that the primitive species might use, announcing their arrival and demanding immediate surrender. The message was simple and had worked on 47 previous worlds. Creatures of the 3rd planet, we are Drakmor warriors of the Zephyrian Empire. Your resistance is futile and your weapons are useless against us. Submit now and your deaths will be swift. Resist and we will make your species suffer before we claim your world. The response from Earth surprised them. Instead of panicked communications or attempts to flee the planet, the humans had gone completely silent. No radio chatter, no emergency broadcasts, no desperate pleas for mercy. The 3 warriors exchanged glances inside their landing craft as they entered the atmosphere. Perhaps they are too frightened to respond, suggested Mordak. But something felt wrong about the silence. What they discovered as they descended through the clouds defied every expectation their intelligence reports had created. The major population centers that satellite images had shown bustling with millions of humans just months before were now empty. Not destroyed or damaged, but carefully evacuated with defensive positions constructed around every strategic location. Captain Amy Rodriguez coordinated the defense from the enhanced NORAD command center, buried deep inside Cheyenne Mountain. Banks of screens showed the alien craft descending toward what had once been Denver, but was now a carefully prepared battlefield. Every major city on Earth had been transformed in the same way over the past 3 months, alien contacts confirmed. Entering atmosphere at grid reference Delta 7, she announced to military commanders around the globe. All units weapons free. Remember people, these things are tough, but they are not gods. Execute Operation Persistence. The first surprise came when human missiles struck the Drakmor landing craft. The weapons were primitive compared to Zephyrian technology and could not penetrate the craft's shields, but the coordinated barrage from dozens of launch sites forced the aliens to crash land in the Rocky Mountains. Instead of their planned landing zone near the abandoned city, Zekthar pulled himself from the wreckage of their transport and scanned the mountainous terrain around them. His armor's sensors detected no immediate threats, but something felt fundamentally wrong about this situation. In 47 previous conquests, the local species had either fled in terror or mounted hopeless direct attacks on Drakmor positions. Never had they faced an enemy that seemed to have simply vanished. Clever vermin, he muttered to his companions. They have changed the battlefield to their advantage, but it will not matter. We are Drakmor. What the three warriors did not understand was that humanity had spent the past 3 months doing far more than building weapons or evacuating cities. Every military expert on Earth had studied the limited intelligence about Zephyrian physiology, psychology, and tactics. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, and Special Operations units from every nation had trained together, sharing knowledge and developing strategies that no single military had ever attempted. Staff Sergeant Mike Torres led a 12-man reconnaissance team through the dense pine forest, watching the alien warriors through thermal imaging scopes from concealed positions 2 miles away. The humans had learned that Drakmor armor relied heavily on advanced sensor systems and energy shields, both of which had weaknesses that could be exploited by patient and creative opponents. Remember, Torres whispered into his radio. These things are physically superior to us in every way. They are stronger, faster, and better armed. But Dr. Chang's analysis showed they depend on their technology, and they have never faced guerrilla warfare tactics. We do not try to overpower them. We make them afraid. The human strategy was unlike anything in the Zephyrian military database. Instead of massed infantry attacks or orbital bombardments, the defenders would use Earth itself as a weapon. Every advantage their home planet provided would be turned against the invaders who had never fought in environments they did not control, as the 3 Drakmor warriors began moving toward the nearest human settlement. They walked into the most sophisticated, asymmetric warfare campaign in human history. Coordinated by every military mind on the planet, the operation involved over 50,000 personnel working in perfect synchronization across multiple time zones and theaters of operation. Colonel Sandra Lopez coordinated the overall strategy from the Pentagon, while field commanders like Torres implemented tactics on the ground. The plan had been developed using lessons learned from every successful guerrilla campaign in human history, from the American Revolution to Vietnam to Afghanistan. The difference was that this time every military force on Earth was working together, with unlimited resources and a single shared objective. Phase 1 is complete, Lopez announced to the Global Command Network, as reports came in from observation teams around the Rocky Mountains. Targets have landed in designated Kill Zone Alpha. All teams report ready status. Now we show them what humans can really do when we stop fighting each other and start fighting together. The Drakmor warriors had expected to face a technologically inferior species that would either surrender immediately or make futile stands with primitive weapons. Instead, they found themselves in an environment where every tree, every rock, and every breath of mountain air seemed to be working against them. Their sensors detected no enemies, but their enhanced instincts screamed warnings of danger from every direction. Mordak was the first to speak his concerns. War leader, something is not right about this place. My combat sensors show no threats, but I feel as though we are being watched by 1,000 eyes. Zekthar dismissed the concern, but privately. He was beginning to understand that their intelligence about humans had been catastrophically incomplete. These creatures had not behaved according to any pattern in the Zephyrian database. Instead of showing fear or desperation, they seemed to have simply vanished, leaving behind a battlefield designed to psychological torture rather than direct confrontation. What the 3 Drakmor warriors were about to discover was that humans had not evolved to be the strongest or fastest species on their world. They had survived by being persistence hunters who could track prey for days across any terrain, and who could adapt their tactics to exploit every weakness their enemies possessed. For millions of years they had been the species that turned being, hunted into hunting, and they were about to teach the Zephyrian Empire what it meant to be prey. 3 weeks after the capture of the Drakmor strike force, Commander Vexthul paced nervously through the command center of the Dominion's Edge. The massive battleship hung in space at the edge of the human solar system, waiting for word from his supposedly unstoppable warriors. Long-range sensors showed the wreckage of their landing craft in the Rocky Mountains, but no life signs or communication signals from Strike Force Alpha. "This is impossible," he muttered to intelligence officer Kethra, who stood nearby monitoring deep space communications arrays. 3 Drakmor warriors cannot simply vanish without a trace. Their armor alone should have allowed them to survive anything these primitive humans could deploy against them. What Commander Vexthul did not know was that his 3 warriors were very much alive and in excellent health. They were being held in a specially constructed containment facility beneath Cheyenne Mountain, where human scientists and military experts had spent weeks conducting detailed studies of Zephyrian physiology technology and, most importantly, psychology. Dr. Chung presented her final analysis to President Carter and the assembled leaders of the Global Defense Council. The psychological breakdown was complete within 72 hours, she reported with clinical precision. Once separated from their technological advantages and placed in uncontrolled environments, the Zephyrian warriors displayed cognitive patterns consistent with severe trauma responses. Their species has simply never evolved the mental resilience that humans developed through millions of years of surviving as prey animals. General Harrison studied the captured alien equipment which human engineers had been carefully examining. Their technology is undeniably impressive, but it is designed exclusively for overwhelming superiority scenarios. They have no backup systems for extended conflict, no protocols for resource conservation during asymmetric warfare, and no psychological training for situations where they are not in complete control. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison had been working around the clock with linguistics teams to decode additional intercepted Zephyrian communications. The intelligence they had gathered painted a clear picture of the alien empire's structure and capabilities. "We have identified their main fleet's location," he reported. 47 ships carrying approximately 100,000 military personnel. They are currently waiting at the edge of our solar system, expecting a victory report from the strike force. Based on their communications, they view this as a routine conquest operation. President Carter listened carefully to all the reports before making a decision that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. "We are going to send Commander Vexthul a message," she announced. "Not a surrender, not a plea for mercy, and certainly not a threat. We are going to show them exactly what happened to their best warriors and explain why it happened." The transmission was carefully prepared over several days using captured Zephyrian communication equipment to ensure perfect clarity. It began with war leader Zekthar speaking directly to his commanders in his own language. The proud warrior who had landed on Earth weeks earlier was gone, replaced by a broken individual whose voice carried the weight of complete defeat. "I am war leader Zekthar of Strike Force Alpha," he said, staring directly into the camera with eyes that had seen the impossible. "We failed not because the humans possess superior weapons or advanced technology, but because we fundamentally misunderstood what strength means. They turned our own advantages against us and showed us what it feels like to be prey." The message continued with detailed recordings of human defensive strategies. Tactical experts explained how supposedly primitive humans had neutralized technologically superior opponents through environmental manipulation, psychological warfare, and coordinated asymmetric resistance. The documentation was thorough and undeniable, showing every aspect of the campaign that had broken the Drakmor warriors. Combat specialist Mordak appeared next, his voice hollow and defeated, as he described the psychological torture of being constantly watched by invisible enemies. "They made us afraid," he said simply. "For the first time in our species' history, we experienced what our victims must have felt. The sensation of being hunted by creatures we could not see or fight." Helvain's portion of the message was perhaps the most disturbing for Zephyrian viewers. The warrior who had been trapped in the modified cave system spoke about darkness and confusion and the terror of being lost in an environment designed to break his mind. "Our armor protected our bodies," he explained, "but nothing could protect our minds from fear we had never learned to process." The transmission concluded with Admiral Kate Sullivan, Earth's newly appointed Space Defense Commander, addressing the Zephyrian fleet directly. Her words were calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in their implications. "People of the Zephyrian Empire," she began, "your warriors are alive and unharmed. They are being treated according to humanitarian standards that we developed to maintain dignity even during warfare. We return them to you along with this message. Earth is under human protection. We do not seek conquest or expansion, but we will defend our world and our allies using every advantage our evolution has provided." She paused, allowing the implications to sink in before continuing. "Your species conquered 47 worlds through technological and physical superiority. You have never faced opponents who adapted to turn weakness into strength or who understood that survival sometimes requires becoming the predator rather than remaining the prey. Choose your next actions very carefully. Aboard the Dominion's Edge, Commander Vex Thul watched the transmission in stunned silence. Around him, his crew struggled to process concepts that challenged everything they believed about warfare and dominance. The idea of defeat without destruction of psychological weapons that could break Drakmor minds, and of primitive species turning environmental factors into strategic advantages, was completely outside their experience. Intelligence. Officer Kethra was the first to speak, her voice shaky with uncertainty. Commander, I recommend immediate withdrawal from this system. The humans represent a threat profile that our military doctrine cannot address. We are not equipped to fight enemies who use fear itself as a weapon. For the first time in Zephyrian military history, a fleet commander faced with technologically inferior opponents chose retreat over attack. The decision went against every instinct and training protocol, but the evidence was undeniable. 3 of their finest warriors had been psychologically shattered by creatures who fought with creativity rather than strength. As the Zephyrian fleet turned away from Earth's solar system, they carried with them a new understanding that would ripple across the galaxy. Word would spread among the stars that there was a species where the hunted had learned to hunt, where the weak had become dangerous not through superior technology, but through the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The humans had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had introduced an entirely new concept of warfare, based on psychological pressure, environmental exploitation, and the kind of stubborn adaptive creativity that could only come from a species that had survived by outlasting rather than overpowering their enemies. In the years that followed, when other alien civilizations encountered humanity among the stars, they would remember the fate of the Drakmor warriors and ask themselves a crucial question. Were they prepared to face a species that viewed impossible odds not as certain defeat, but simply as another problem that required creative solutions? The answer for most would be no, and humanity would take its place in the galaxy not as conquerors, but as the one species that others were afraid to test. They had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from being the biggest predator, but from being the prey animal that refuses to stay prey. Helvain's bio-reading spiked beyond normal parameters as complete darkness surrounded him in the cave system. The Drakmor warrior, who had been genetically designed to feel no fear, found himself experiencing emotions that his species had eliminated from their psychology thousands of years ago. Claustrophobia, panic, and the terrible realization that he was trapped in an environment completely beyond his control. His armor's emergency systems activated, automatically injecting stimulants and stabilizers into his bloodstream, but nothing could calm the primal terror that overwhelmed his enhanced nervous system. The cave passages had become a 3-dimensional nightmare, where every turn led to deeper confusion, and every corridor seemed to shift when he was not looking directly at it. War leader. I am experiencing severe disorientation. He transmitted, his voice breaking in ways that would have been impossible for a Drakmor warrior under normal circumstances. My navigation systems cannot map this terrain, and my power levels are critical. Above-ground specialist Katie Morgan monitored his vital signs through seismic sensors and thermal imaging equipment hidden throughout the cave network. The readings showed a creature in complete psychological collapse despite suffering no physical injuries whatsoever. Target Charlie is experiencing complete system overload, she reported to the command center. Stress hormones off the chart, suit power down to 15%, and growing signs of cognitive breakdown. His species clearly never evolved mechanisms for dealing with extended psychological pressure. The human psychological warfare campaign had evolved far beyond simple intimidation tactics. Dr. Chang's team had identified specific weaknesses in Zephyrian physiology that their own medical experts had never considered vulnerabilities. Adapted to their homeworld's stable, predictable environment, their nervous systems could not efficiently process the constant flood of stress chemicals triggered by unpredictable and uncontrollable situations. Meanwhile, Mordak faced his own version of psychological torture in the forest clearing. What appeared to be empty wilderness was actually surrounded by dozens of concealed human positions, but the defenders never attacked directly. Instead, they created a constant sense of impending danger that gradually wore down his mental defenses. Every few minutes a twig would snap in the distance, just loud enough for his enhanced hearing to detect. Shadows would move at the edge of his vision when he turned to investigate. Sounds would suggest coordinated movement from multiple directions simultaneously. For a creature whose species had dominated through overwhelming force, the experience of being unable to identify or engage specific threats was psychologically devastating. Senior Airman Danny Foster watched through thermal imaging as the alien warrior's body temperature fluctuated wildly while his armor's environmental controls struggled to compensate for extreme stress responses. The power drain was enormous and growing worse by the hour. His armor's struggling to keep up with stress-induced system overload, Foster reported. Power levels down to 60% and dropping. Estimate complete system failure within 8 hours. If current trends continue, the humans had discovered that Drakmor warriors were psychologically dependent on their technological superiority and tactical certainty. Remove those advantages and they became as vulnerable as any other creature facing situations beyond their experience or training. War leader Zekthar had managed to climb out of the chemical trap, but his armor now showed visible corrosion damage across multiple systems. Worse, the experience had shattered his confidence in everything he had been taught about human capabilities. If these supposedly primitive creatures could threaten Drakmor equipment with simple industrial chemicals and mechanical engineering, what other surprises had they prepared? As he pushed deeper into the forest, his motion sensors continued to detect movement on all sides, but every time he moved to engage the contacts, they vanished like ghosts. The humans had spent weeks studying his armor's detection capabilities and had learned to exploit every limitation and blind spot in the system. They moved in patterns that created false sensor readings, used natural terrain to mask their heat signatures, and coordinated their activities to create maximum confusion in his targeting systems. What should have been a simple search and destroy mission had become a nightmarish game where he could never identify his enemies or predict their next move master. Sergeant Linda Wright coordinated the harassment campaign from a camouflaged observation post that had taken her team 6 days to construct. The position looked like a natural rock formation, but contained sophisticated monitoring equipment and communication systems that allowed her to track every movement. The alien warrior made psychological analysis indicates target Alpha is approaching complete breakdown, she reported to Central Command. His movement patterns are becoming erratic. Power consumption is critical and bio-readings suggest extreme stress, approaching system failure. Dr. Chang's assessment was correct about their fundamental weakness. The revelation that shook the foundations of Zephyrian military doctrine was simple but devastating. The Drakmor warriors had been designed and trained to be apex predators in controlled environments where they possessed overwhelming advantages. They had never learned to function as prey animals in hostile territory, where every element of the environment worked against them. Dr. Chang had understood this vulnerability from the beginning of her analysis. Species that evolve as dominant predators, she had explained to the human military leadership, develop psychological frameworks based on control and superiority. Remove those frameworks, and they experience cognitive breakdown far more severe than species that evolved as prey animals with flexible survival strategies. The breakthrough moment came when Helvain's armor systems finally collapsed under the strain of trying to navigate the impossible cave network while managing his psychological crisis. Emergency power failed, leaving him in complete darkness, with only the sound of his own panicked breathing echoing off cave walls. The absolute darkness triggered something primal in his nervous system that no amount of genetic enhancement could suppress. For the first time in his existence, he experienced the terror that prey animals felt when cornered by predators. His screams of anguish and fear echoed through the modified cave system as he collapsed into unconsciousness. "Target Charlie is down," Captain Parker announced with satisfaction. "Complete suit failure, alien unconscious but stable. Medical sensors indicate he is physically unharmed, but psychologically shattered. Recommend immediate extraction and containment." For Zekthar, receiving that transmission marked the moment when everything he believed about Zephyrian superiority crumbled. His warriors had not been defeated by superior weapons or advanced technology. They had been systematically broken down by tactics that exploited psychological weaknesses no Zephyrian military planner had ever considered. The humans had turned the most basic elements of their environment into weapons. Darkness, Silence, uncertainty, and the constant pressure of being watched had accomplished what plasma cannons and kinetic weapons from dozens of other species had failed to achieve. They had made Drakmor warriors afraid. As Mordak's position was, finally overrun by what seemed like an army of invisible enemies, and his own suit systems began failing from power drain and stress overload, Zekthar realized with growing horror that he might become the first Drakmor warrior in Zephyrian history to face the ultimate humiliation, not death in glorious combat which would at least preserve his honor, but capture by a species his people had dismissed as primitive and weak. The implications for the Zephyrian Empire were staggering, and as his own armor's power dropped to critical levels, he began to understand that this small blue planet might represent something entirely new in galactic warfare, a species that had learned to turn being hunted into hunting and being weak into being dangerous through methods that no other civilization had ever developed or even imagined possible. The humans were about to teach the galaxy a lesson about the difference between strength through domination and strength through survival.